I never thought telling the truth would get me fired. But then again, I never thought he'd be the one to pull the trigger. That's how it started. One stupid meeting on a rainy Tuesday that ended my career. But before we get there, let me tell you how I got tangled in a web of lies I didn't even know existed. My name's Eli Harper, 32, senior project analyst at Granite Dynamics, a tech firm that prides itself on transparency and innovation. Ironically, transparency was the very thing that got me kicked out. I've always believed honesty wasn't just a virtue, it was my edge. I wasn't the smartest in the room, but people trusted me. I made sure numbers were clean, reports were accurate, and credit went where it was due. In a company full of people playing politics, I thought that made me safe. And for a while, it did. Especially with Marcus Hale, my manager and, I thought, my friend. Marcus had this calm confidence that made everyone want to follow him. He'd always pat me on the shoulder and say, "You're the only one I can count on, Eli." I ate that up like validation candy. We'd grab lunch together, laugh about office gossip, even watch the game on weekends. I told him about my dad's stroke, about the bills piling up, and how much this promotion meant to me. Marcus just listened, nodded, and said, "Don't worry, man. I've got your back." And I believed him. He was the kind of guy who could charm a room with a single smile, always cool under pressure, always saying the right thing. I wanted to be like him. But here's the thing about people like Marcus. They make loyalty feel like a promise when it's really a leash. It all started to unravel during the Q4 financial review. I noticed something off in the reports. Subtle inconsistencies, a few adjusted numbers that didn't match the actual data. I figured it was a mistake, so I flagged it for Marcus privately. He smiled, leaned back in his chair and said, "Good catch, Eli. I'll take care of it." And just like that, the moment passed. But days later, the same errors showed up again, this time even bolder. When I asked about it, Marcus brushed it off. "Don't worry about the details. Just trust me." Something in his tone, the sharp edge behind that easy smile, made my stomach twist. For the first time, I wondered if my honesty wasn't a strength anymore, but a threat. And I couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus wasn't the only one keeping secrets. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe Marcus was just under pressure. Maybe I was overthinking it. But once you see a crack, you can't unsee it. A week after that conversation, the office started to feel different. The air was heavier, whispers lingered longer, and people suddenly stopped looping me in on projects I used to lead. It wasn't blatant, just subtle enough to make me question my sanity. Marcus would stroll past my desk and say, "Appreciate your thoroughness, Eli," in that calm, silky tone of his. But there was always a delay, like his words had to pass through a filter of irritation before they reached me. Then came the emails. I'd open a report and find that my edits were gone, replaced with numbers that didn't add up. When I asked Marcus, he said, "Oh, I made a few last-minute tweaks. You must have missed the update." Always said with a smile, always perfectly plausible. But the timestamps told a different story. He was changing the data after final approval, always late at night, right before submission. The weirdest part? He'd CC everyone except me. Still, I tried to convince myself it was fine. Marcus wouldn't do that to me. Not after everything. We were friends. We'd built this department together. I owed him my career, didn't I? But the red flags kept stacking up. One afternoon, I caught him talking with Clara, our new intern. They were laughing, nothing unusual, but as soon as I walked in, the room went silent. Marcus straightened his tie, Clara looked down at her notebook, and the air thickened with that awkward, unspoken tension. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Of course," Marcus said quickly. "Just going over some projections." But there were no documents open. Just his empty desktop and the reflection of my confused face on his monitor. That night, I stayed late to finish a report. Around 9:30 p.m., I heard Marcus in the hallway, talking on the phone. His voice was low, clipped, the tone he used when he wasn't performing for anyone. I couldn't make out the whole conversation, but I caught fragments. He's asking too many questions. Just make sure the numbers match. If he pushes again, I'll handle it. My stomach dropped. For a moment, I thought about walking out and confronting him. But I didn't. I just sat there in the dark, my hands trembling on the keyboard, wondering if I'd just imagined it all. Because the truth is, I didn't want to believe Marcus could lie to me. I didn't want to believe that the man who'd stood by me through my dad's illness, who'd promised me loyalty, was now quietly erasing me, one spreadsheet at a time. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. And once trust starts to crack, it never goes back to the way it was. The day everything fell apart started like any other. Coffee in hand, inbox full, and a to-do list that looked like it could bury me alive. I didn't know it yet, but by lunchtime, my career would be gone. That morning, I was scheduled to present our Q4 report to the executive board. My report. The one I'd spent weeks perfecting. Every line of data checked, every figure verified. I'd even triple-checked the numbers after noticing Marcus's adjustments. But when the projector flickered on in the glass conference room, the slides weren't mine. They were Marcus's. The formatting was identical, but the numbers were inflated, profit margins higher, costs lower, projections impossibly rosy. It was the same report, rewritten to look like a miracle. And my name? Gone. Marcus, what? I started, but he cut me off with a practiced smile. Sorry for the mix-up, he said smoothly. Eli helped compile some data, but this final version is my responsibility. The executives nodded, impressed. One of them clapped Marcus on the shoulder. Outstanding work, Hale. This is exactly the optimism we need. Optimism. That's what they called it. I sat there, my pulse hammering in my ears, watching Marcus lie through his teeth, using my work, my data, my long nights, and twist it into something fraudulent. When I tried to speak up, Marcus shot me a look that froze me in place. The kind that said, "Don't you dare." So I stayed quiet. For that moment. But afterward, I went straight to HR, report in hand, determined to set the record straight. I told them about the falsified data, the after-hours changes, the deception. I thought they'd listen. They didn't. 2 hours later, Marcus called me into his office. He didn't look angry, just disappointed. The kind of look a father gives his son before delivering bad news. Eli, he sighed, I wish you'd come to me first. You've put the company in a difficult position. Marcus, you falsified. He raised his hand, cutting me off. No, you misinterpreted the data. And now you've created unnecessary drama. The board thinks you're unstable. That word hit harder than I expected. Unstable. He leaned back, eyes soft, voice dripping with practiced sympathy. You're a good guy, Eli. But maybe, take some time off. Clear your head. I knew what that meant before he even slid the envelope across the desk. Termination. Effective immediately. He didn't even look at me when he said, "It's for the best." I walked out of that building in silence, my badge still warm from the scanner, the rain soaking through my shirt. For the first time, I realized honesty hadn't just cost me my job. It had made me the villain in someone else's story. But as I stood on the sidewalk, watching the lights of Granite Dynamics flicker through the downpour, something in me shifted. The grief hardened. The confusion turned to focus. And through the reflection in the glass doors, I saw it, that faint, dangerous spark in my own eyes. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. For 3 days after getting fired, I didn't move. I sat in my apartment surrounded by unopened boxes of takeout and silence thick enough to choke on. The kind of silence that hums in your ears and makes you question if maybe, just maybe, they were right about you. Marcus's words kept looping in my head. Unstable. Difficult. For the best. It's amazing how fast a person's confidence can crumble when the world stops believing them. I replayed that meeting 100 times. The smug nods from the board. The pitying glance from Clara. The way Marcus kept his hands steady as he signed my termination letter, as if erasing me was just another item on his checklist. I wanted to scream, to do something. But all I could do was stare at the rain outside, dripping down the window like it was mocking me. Then, on the fourth night, something changed. It wasn't dramatic. No thunder, no lightning. Just a ping on my laptop. An email. From Clara. It was short, barely 2 sentences, but it shattered the fog around me. Eli, I'm sorry. You were right. I can't say more, but check the shared drive. Folder, Q4_archive. Don't tell anyone you saw this. My hands trembled as I clicked the link. Inside were dozens of files, spreadsheets, drafts, financial statements. Some were mine. Others were altered. Red flags everywhere. Marcus had been rerouting funds, padding revenue, using ghost accounts to inflate profits. And every falsified report had one thing in common. My name, buried deep in the metadata. He'd used my credentials. My login. My honesty, to make his lies look legitimate. That was the moment something inside me snapped. All the humiliation, the confusion, the heartbreak, it melted into a single focused thought. He used me. I could almost hear his voice again, calm and condescending. You're the only one I can count on, Eli. Yeah. To take the fall. That night, I didn't sleep. I went through every file, cross-referenced every change, every timestamp, every digital fingerprint. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became. Marcus hadn't just sabotaged me. He'd built his entire career on my integrity. And now he was sitting on the promotion that should have been mine, wearing a hero's grin built on my grave. By sunrise, the grief was gone. All that was left was resolve. Sharp, cold, and clean. I closed my laptop, looked at my reflection in the dark screen, and whispered, "You wanted me gone, Marcus. But you forgot, honest people keep receipts." I didn't know how yet. But I knew this much. I wasn't going to rest until the truth burned its way through granite dynamics. And when it did, I'd make sure Marcus felt the heat first. I treated revenge like a project plan, because that's what it was. No yelling. No blind rage. Just timelines, contingencies, and airtight evidence. If Marcus wanted to play chess with other people's lives, I was going to play better. I copied every file from the Q4_archive to 3 separate places. An encrypted external drive, a burner cloud account under a pseudonym, and an email draft saved to go out automatically if anything happened to me. Metadata, change logs, old drafts, timestamps, nothing was left to chance. I learned how to read metadata like a detective reads fingerprints. Every after-hours tweak had a signature. Every time Marcus used my login, there was a trail. Clara was scared but loyal. She'd been the one who slid me that first message, and she'd been watching Marcus longer than I realized. She had access to the intern-only folders and a camera phone full of screenshots. Then there was Raj, the IT guy who owed me a favor after I recommended him for the network admin job 2 years ago. Raj wasn't flashy, but he could pull logs that HR couldn't scrub without leaving a trace. I told them what I needed: access logs, VPN timestamps, and the server-side copies of the final reports. They delivered. I created a decoy, a harmless spreadsheet with a deliberately absurd anomaly buried 3 cells deep. Nothing that would ruin the company, just an obvious mathematical blunder you couldn't miss. I saved it under a file name Marcus liked to grab before board meetings and set the file's permissions so it would flag his account if opened. If he touched it, he'd trigger the very logs that would tie him to the falsified reports. I wrote a calm, factual timeline of events, not a screaming manifesto, and had Raj timestamp and sign it digitally. I reached out to an old mentor in corporate compliance, not to accuse, but to ask hypotheticals and test which channels would act. That mentor didn't know my name yet. He only knew facts. That distance would make his response credible later. Marcus had always loved being the person who handled things. He thrived on control. So I made sure he felt it. I congratulated him on the promotion in a message he could screenshot and kept showing up, accidentally, in places he expected me to vanish from. Calm. Polite. Unthreatening. Let him believe I was defeated. Let him relax. While I did all of this, I watched him from the edges. The smiles, the late-night confidence, the way he leaned into praise from the board. He was exactly where I wanted him. Comfortable, unchecked, and utterly convinced his version of the story had stuck. I slept in short bursts and thought in lists. Each small move fit into the larger plan like gears in a watch. By the time Clara sent the final set of logs, the pattern was undeniable. Marcus had built a ladder of lies with my fingerprint on every rung. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., the board package goes out. Marcus will open the file he always opens, expecting the usual applause. He won't know he's about to step on the first of a dozen carefully placed tripwires. And I'll be waiting, calm, patient, and ready to pull the cord. The boardroom smelled of coffee and polished wood, the same place Marcus had turned my life into a punchline. Today it smelled different, like ozone before a storm. I sat at the far end of the table, Clara 2 seats down, Raj in the corner with a USB stick like a loaded weapon. The executives chatted, oblivious, until the legal counsel nodded and the room went quiet. Mr. Hale, the CEO began, cheerful as ever, we thought we'd celebrate the quarterly. I watched Marcus preen, already expecting applause. He didn't notice how steady I'd become. Raj stood and, with the legal counsel's permission, plugged the drive into the presentation laptop. We have a timeline, he said. We also have server-side logs, VPN timestamps, and copies of the original drafts. He clicked, and the first slide displayed a neat, merciless timeline mapping every suspicious change to Marcus's account and the nights he logged in. Metadata. IP addresses. The board's smiles froze into small, sharp things. Clara had the courage to stand next. She read a short note, the one she'd sent me months ago, about shadow folders and whispered meetings. Her hands didn't shake when she said Marcus had whispered to her to adjust a number, and told her not to worry about who noticed. Marcus's smile faltered. For the first time, the man who'd always owned a room looked like he'd misplaced his script. He started to talk fast. Charm turned to scramble. You don't understand the context, he said. Those are internal drafts. Raj clicked another slide. Screenshots of Marcus opening the decoy file I'd planted, the alarm ping that tied his session to the altered reports, log entries showing him using my credentials from a remote terminal on 3 separate occasions. The legal counsel leaned forward, lips tight. I had nothing to do with, Marcus stammered. You used his credentials to legitimize your numbers, the counsel said, not unkindly. If these logs are accurate, you've committed fraud and compromised fiduciary duty. He looked at the CEO. We need to suspend him pending investigation. The room erupted in hushed chaos. Phones came out. Counsel called external auditors. The CEO's face was a map of disappointment. The applause Marcus had expected turned into thin, awkward coughs. HR collected Marcus's badge while he tried, uselessly, to explain himself. He begged a few people for private words, a chair, a handshake, a second chance, but no one moved to give them. Colleagues who'd once laughed at his jokes now avoided his eyes. When security walked him out, the corridor felt impossibly long. He glanced at me once, a desperate, pleading look that used to be full of warmth. Now it was the hollow look of a man who'd been found out. He mouthed something I couldn't hear. Maybe it was sorry. Maybe it was a plea. Maybe it was nothing at all. The elevator doors closed on him. The building buzzed back to life around us, but inside the room there was a silence so loud it sounded like a verdict. I sat back, palms flat on the table, and felt the weight of everything lift and settle. All those nights of quiet work, all the small humiliations, the winter of doubt, they condensed into one clear thing. Truth had a way of coming home. Outside, rain started again, soft at first, then harder, washing the city in streaks. I let it hit the window and didn't move. The storm had taken Marcus's mask. For the first time since the rain-drenched walkout months ago, I felt something like peace. And somewhere, in a pocket of the city, a man who'd once said he had my back was alone in the dark, exactly where his choices had put him. It's strange. The day after someone's downfall always feels quieter than you expect. No victory music, no cinematic applause, just silence. The kind that lets you finally hear your own heartbeat again. Marcus's name hit the company-wide memo before noon. Effective immediately, Marcus Hale has been terminated pending legal investigation. The words were clean and corporate, no emotion, no history, but they carried the weight of every lie he'd told. By evening, his LinkedIn was scrubbed, his company email locked, his reputation already unraveling thread by thread. The same people who once called him a visionary were now whispering about ethics violations and asset audits. And me. The CEO called me personally. Said they'd made a serious error in judgment. Offered to reinstate my position, even hinted at a promotion, now that my integrity had proven invaluable. I thanked him politely. Declined. Because the truth is, I didn't want to go back. That office, those fluorescent lights, that world built on polished lies, it all felt too small now. Instead, I used every piece of data, every late-night file, to start something new. A consulting firm that audits corporations for internal fraud. Transparent. Honest. Exactly what Granite Dynamics pretended to be. And here's the irony. 2 months later, they became my first client. I remember the email like a scene from a movie. Mr. Harper, we could really use your expertise. The same company that fired me for being honest was now paying me for it. Poetic, isn't it? When I walked back into that boardroom, not as their employee, but as their consultant, Marcus's old office door was still closed, a faint plaque outline where his name used to be. I paused there for a second, not out of spite, but to remind myself how far I'd come. They say revenge doesn't heal you. Maybe that's true. But justice? Justice gives you back the parts of yourself they tried to take. That night, I visited my dad's grave, the man who taught me that integrity isn't about being liked, it's about being able to sleep at night. I told him everything. About the fall. About the fire. About how honesty didn't destroy me. It refined me. And as I left, I looked up at the city lights reflected on the wet pavement and thought, the truth doesn't shout. It waits. And when it finally speaks, the liars are the first to go quiet. Have you ever been betrayed for doing the right thing? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you believe karma always finds its way back around, hit subscribe. The next story might just be yours.